देखिए, माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स के मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट एमसीक्यू हैं। इससे पहले भी हम कई पार्ट में माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स के मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट एमसीक्यू ला चुके हैं। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं। अगर जो प्राइस है वो फिक्स्ड है और वो एसी के इक्वल है, तो जो मोनोपोली का प्रॉफिट होगा वो कैसा होगा? वो होगा एलिमिनेटेड। उसका प्रॉफिट जो है वो ख़त्म हो जाएगा। ओलिगोपॉलिस्टिक इंडस्ट्री आर ऑलवेज इन। जो हमारी अल्पाधिकार इंडस्ट्री होती हैं वो कैसी होती हैं? तो वो जो होती हैं हमेशा प्राइस कंपटीशन में होता है। इनमें से ऑड हमको छांटना है। तो देखिए, सेंट्रलाइज कार्टेल लीड टू मोनोपोली सिचुएशन। सॉल्यूशन ये सही है। सेंट्रलाइज्ड कार्टेल बिहेव एज मल्टी प्लांट, ये भी सही है। इलीगल इन यूएस, ये पावर है मोनोपोली की, यही हमारा ऑड है। If government levies a tax per unit of output, the price per unit for the firm would rise by less than amount of the tax. Selling cotton at higher price in Bombay and lower price in London means, ये है डंपिंग। देखिए, डंपिंग भी है और डंपिंग रेफर्स टू सेलिंग ऑफ कॉटन, दोनों सेम ही आंसर हैं ये। The allocation of resources among industry are and firm are analyzed by the, जो इंडस्ट्री के बीच में एलोकेशन होता है रिसोर्स का और फर्म जो होती है वो एनालाइज करती हैं थ्योरी ऑफ, ये डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की थ्योरी है। फंक्शनल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ इनकम इज़ द पावर ऑफ द, मतलब जो हम इनकम का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन करते हैं फंक्शनल, तो वो क्या धुरी है हमारी? तो वो जो धुरी है वो हमारी थ्योरी ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन है और फैक्टर प्राइसिंग दोनों है हमारी। द डिमांड फॉर फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इज़ डिटरमाइंड बाई, जो हमारे प्रोडक्शन के फैक्टर की डिमांड है वो किसके द्वारा निर्धारित होती है? वो होती है ड्राइव्ड डिमांड कर्व, व्युत्पन्न मांग के द्वारा। द डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ इनकम बिटवीन ओनर्स ऑफ फैक्टर ऑफ रिसोर्सेज इज कंटेन्ड इन द थ्योरी ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, provided the price of product does not rise and output expand, and when one factor is fixed, the MRP of other factor will decline. The money income of the resource owner are determined by, जो हमारे रिसोर्स ओनर हैं उनकी मनी इनकम किसके द्वारा डिटरमाइंड होती है? वेज, रेंट, इंटरेस्ट एंड प्रॉफिट। What the factor expect to get in the next best use earning is known as transfer price. A factor will continue to work in the present use up to a point when its reward becomes equal to transfer price. The difference between actual and transfer earning may be considered as rent. The marginal physical output is an extra product generated by adding one unit of a variable resources to fixed resources. The relation between MRP and MPP of a firm which is a competitor in the product market is direct. If supply of a factor is perfectly elastic for all quantity, it will not earn rent. Rent is a earning of specific factor. An employer will continue to hire unit of a variable factor until MRP equal its MW. कोई भी फैक्टर है वो जब तक डिमांड करता रहेगा जब तक कि उसकी एमआरपी है वो उसके प्राइस के इक्वल नहीं हो जाती। ये है परफेक्ट कंपटीशन में इन द फैक्टर मार्केट। द फिजिकल क्वांटिटी ऑफ produce products and the price at which the product can be sold determined the demand of a productive resources by a firm. Maximization of profit is the ultimate aim of production of a firm. Which of the following statement is correct? The profit maximizing firm should raise the variable factor until MRP is equal to MFC, ये सही है। The MRP of a variable factor equal product, ये गलत है। The demand for a factor production is an example of payment, ये भी गलत है। Rent arises on all factors according to modern theory. Secondary cost is one of the determinants of quasi rent. The subsistence waste theory is due to Malthus. The earning of a specific factor is all rent. According to the marginal productivity theory, the price of a factor of production approximate very closely to the value of the marginal product of the average firm. The concept of the reserve army of labor is due to Karl Marx. Net specific factor which can be put to numerous uses. Earn a small amount of rent. The demand for a factor. The demand for a factor of production is said to be derived demand because it depends on the supply of complementary factor. It stems from the demand for the final product. It arises out of means being scarce in the relation to wants. In the new classical theory of wages, the wage fluctuates so as to equate current demand for and supply of labor, unless interfered with by monopoly or monopsony element. The earning of a haunted house is all rent. The aggregate supply of land is absolutely inelastic. देखिए किसी भी फैक्टर से जो रेंट है वो कब राइज होता है, सप्लाई फॉर ए पर्टिकुलर पर्पज इन इनइलास्टिक. एवरीवन इन एन इकोनॉमी डज नॉट गेट इक्वल वेज. हर किसी को इकोनॉमी में इक्वल वेज नहीं मिलती क्योंकि स्किल एंड एबिलिटीज डिफर. लेबर लेक्स कंप्लीट मोबिलिटी. सम ऑक्यूपेशन हैव नॉन पिक्यूनरी बेनिफिट्स और हैजार्ड. ट्रेड यूनियन वेरी इन देयर बार्गेनिंग पावर. तो सभी सही हैं. The marginal revenue product of a factor tends to diminish it as input of the factor increases because of the technical impact of diminishing marginal return, diminishing rate of substitutability of a factor. मॉडर्न थ्योरी के अनुसार रेंट सभी फैक्टर से मिलता है. विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग आइटम कैन बी क्लासिफाइड अंडर लेबर. इनमें से कौन सा आइटम है वो अंडर लेबर के क्लासिफाइड कर सकते हैं. तो वो है हमारा सर्वेंट बाइंग वेजिटेबल फॉर हिज मास्टर, ए फिजिकल इंस्ट्रक्टर प्लेइंग हॉकी विद हिज स्टूडेंट, ए पोइट कंपोजिंग लिरिक फॉर ए मूवी, ए डॉक्टर परफॉर्मिंग एन ऑपरेशन. देखिए ये वाला नहीं आएगा होमवर्क वाला क्योंकि इसके बदले में कुछ उसको मिल नहीं रहा. और वाइफ फूड बना रही है हस्बैंड के लिए तो उसे उसके बदले में कुछ मिलेगा नहीं. तो इस तरह से जो हमारा आंसर है वो है हमारा बी. द मार्जिनल रेवेन्यू प्रोडक्ट ऑफ एनी फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इज द प्रोडक्ट ऑफ द प्राइस पर यूनिट ऑफ आउटपुट एक्स द मार्जिनल फिजिकल प्रोडक्ट ऑफ द फैक्टर. क्वासी रेंट किसने दिया है, क्वासी रेंट मार्शल ने दिया है जिसे आवास लगान कहते हैं. देखिए जो सब्सिस्टेंस थ्योरी है, निर्वाह मजदूरी का निर्वाह स्तर जो है, लॉन्ग रन सप्लाई कर्व ऑफ लेबर है जिसमें जो हमारा दीर्घकालीन पूर्ति वक्र होता है श्रम का वो कैसा होता है, परफेक्टली इलास्टिक होता है. एन इन परफेक्टली कॉम्पिटिटिव सेलर्स रिसोर्स डिमांड कर्व स्लोप डाउनवर्ड्स बिकॉज. जो एक हमारा अपूर्ण प्रतियोगी जो हमारा सेलर है इसका जो हमारा डिमांड कर्व है वो नीचे की तरफ आता है क्योंकि marginal product diminish and product price falls as output increase. Quasi rent is the return on account of secondary cost. वेज फंड थ्योरी के अनुसार इनमें से कौन सा सही नहीं है. ट्रेड यूनियन एंड कलेक्टिव बार्गेनिंग कैन राइज द वेज फॉर लेबर क्लास एज ए होल. Other thing being equal, more of a factor will be supplied to industry at a higher reward than at a lower reward. एक फैक्टर विल नॉट अर्न रेंट, एक फैक्टर को रेंट नहीं मिलेगा यदि its supply is perfectly elastic as compared to the labor being purchased competitively. Monopsony result in a lower level of employment and a lower wage rate. In practice, the reward paid to a factor depend entirely upon its productivity and the price of the product is mixed. The measure of rent is, rent का जो measure है, the difference of actual earning and transfer earning. A trade union entering a perfectly competitive labor market can raise the wage above the free market level only at the cost of lowering the amount of employment. A factor will continue to work in the present use only if it gets a reward at least equal to its transfer earning. Quasi rent is earned by land even in the long run because land is a gift of nature and hence its supply cannot be increased. Let I be the market rate of interest. The present value of rupees X received at the end of the t year from today is, तो देखिए ये इसका फॉर्मूला होगा x अपॉन 1+i/t। जो ट्रेंड की मॉडर्न थ्योरी है वो किसने दी है, तो वो दी है जॉन रॉबिन्सन ने। लोनेबल फंड थ्योरी lay emphasis on the interplay of both monetary as well as real factor. According to the modern theory, rent is the difference between actual earning and transfer earning. The shape of the demand curve of the factor services the marginal revenue product curve. एक फैक्टर की जो ट्रांसफ़र अर्निंग है, what it expect to get in the next best alternative. क्लासिकल थ्योरी में रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट किसके द्वारा डिटरमाइंड होती थी, इंटरसेक्शन बिटवीन दीज टू कर्व, सेविंग कर्व, डिमांड कर्व। इकोनॉमिक रेंट क्या है, आर्थिक लगान क्या है, आर्थिक लगान है हमारा द प्राइस पेड फॉर द यूज ऑफ लैंड एंड अदर नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज विच आर कम्प्लीटली इलास्टिक इन टोटल सप्लाई। डिफरेंस ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रेट इन ए कंट्री शो दैट, जो हमारे देशों में जो इंटरेस्ट रेट, एक देश में जो इंटरेस्ट रेट का डिफरेंस है वो क्या बताता है, ओनली प्योर इंटरेस्ट रेट इज़ डिफरेंट बट ग्रॉस इंटरेस्ट रेट इज सिमिलर। ओनली ग्रॉस इंटरेस्ट रेट इज डिफरेंट बट प्योर इंटरेस्ट रेट इज सिमिलर। जो हमारी इंटरेस्ट की क्लासिकल थ्योरी है वो किस पे ज़्यादा जोर डालती है, वो डालती है रियल फैक्टर पर। प्योर इंटरेस्ट, शुद्ध ब्याज क्या होता है, तो देखिए जो शुद्ध ब्याज होता है वो हमारा होता है स्मॉलर दैस ग्रॉस इंटरेस्ट। आर्थिक लगान क्या होता है, आर्थिक लगान हमारा होता है सरप्लस ओवर ट्रांसफर अर्निंग ऑफ एनी फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन। इट पेज टू फर्दर purchase a further unit of capital whenever marginal efficiency of capital exceed market rate of interest. A payment made by a borrower to his lender is partly interest and partly reward for other service. First of all, the term quasi rent was used by Professor Marshall. The internal rate of return is a measure of the productivity or efficiency of capital. It is that rate which will just make the present value of the future flow of receipt equal to the purchase price of capital. मैन और वुमेन की मजदूरी में जो अंतर होता है, समटाइम बिकॉज ऑफ डिफरेंसेस ऑफ एफिशिएंसी एंड समटाइम्स नॉट सो। क्वासी रेंट यानी कि आधार लगान का मतलब क्या होता है, तो इसका मतलब होता है द रिटर्न टू ए फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन विच इज़ फिक्स्ड इन सप्लाई इन द शॉर्ट पीरियड। लेट आई बी द मार्केट रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, द प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ एन इनकम स्ट्रीम ऑफ रुपीज़ X received at the end of every year, starting from this year, is X upon I. Differences of wages in an economy are competitive and justified in some cases and non-competitive and not justified in some other. An example of derived demand is a demand for derived डिमांड जो होती है जो किसी वस्तु के इस्तेमाल करने की वजह से किसी और वस्तु की डिमांड आती है, तो इनमें से कोई सी भी नहीं है. The present value of a proposed project which required a lathe machine to be installed now is today's value of the sum of future return. In a monopoly market for the product, MRP decline faster than under competitive market. Quasi-rent occurs because of the application of the principle of short-term inelasticity of supply. As capital stock grows, the margin efficiency of capital decreases. Marginal physical product multiplied by the price per unit is equal to marginal revenue product is relevant for perfectly competitive market for the product. Free gift of nature have another term in economics. Which of the following is surplus good? The net return on capital is equal to gross return minus depreciation. If a seller sells his product in a monopoly market, his MRP for labor will change because of change in MPP and price both. The economic rent earned by any factor will be highest if its elasticity of supply is 0. The productivity of capital refers to net return, real wages and money wages. The former is a wider concept than the latter. रियल वेज बड़ा कॉन्सेप्ट है, मनी वेज जबकि छोटा है. इकोनॉमिक रेंट इज अर्नड बाय ए फैक्टर व्हेन इट्स सप्लाई इज inelastic. The net return on capital is the sum of pure return, risk premium and economic profit. The relation between rent and price as follows. Rent is a price determined, not price determining. If the supply of a factor cannot be increased in the short period and demand for it increases, it will earn a quasi-rent. The monetary return on the marginal rupees worth of capital, marginal rate of return, is called marginal efficiency of capital. In monopoly, the equality of MRP and wage rate will be reached at a lower point of employment of labor. In economy, marginal rent means that land of in which no rent is charged. The theory of distribution refers to the distribution of income among various factors of production. Change in the rate of interest do not affect the amount of money held for both transaction and precautionary motive. If there has been an increase in the average money wage rate, we know the price will increase or profit will fall unless productivity has increased by as much. The sufficient condition for the equilibrium level of employment of a factor production is MRP curve must cut the MFC curve from above. Which of the following is the most acceptable statement? An employer hires a variable factor until its MRP becomes 0. If the average money wage in India were increased to ₹10 per hour, we would know very little unless we know the prices of things people buy. Under perfect competition in factor market, a variable factor is demanded up to a point where MRP is equal to factor price. Under perfectly competitive conditions, labor will be demanded up to a point when its marginal productivity is equal to wage paid. Value of marginal product is defined as MPP is equal to into AR. The most liquid asset is money. Under perfect competitive conditions, wage will be determined at a point where demand for labor is equal to supply of labor. In his analysis, Clark assumed the aggregate supply curve of labor to be perfectly inelastic. It is the equality of the supply of saving and demand for saving which determine the rate of interest. This statement has been rejected in favor of better ones. In an industry, the employer employs 1,000 laborers and he pay the wage of rupees 5 to the last worker. And this is the wage rate for all. Here the employer pays to the employees according to marginal productivity of labor. Average revenue product ARP is defined as AR is equal to APP. An employee's real wages is purchasing power of money. Classical theory explained interest as a reward for saving. For the equilibrium level of employment of a factor of production, the necessary condition is MRP is equal to MFC. Interest is a reward for parting with liquidity, according to James Keynes. Wage fund theory was formulated by J.S. Mill. Under perfect competition in product market, MRP is equal to VMP. The real wage refers to the wage rate people earn after the money they receive has been adjusted for any changes in the price of the things they buy. Which of the following motive refers to holding of money which is interest elastic? The speculative motive. Who suggested that the price of a factor of production is determined by the demand and supply forces? Marshall and Hicks. Under perfect competition, MRP of labor is measured as marginal productivity of labor as price of the product into price of the product. Which of the following statement describe best the content of the theory of distribution? The distribution of income between the owners of factor resources. While analyzing the marginal productivity theory of distribution, Clark gave more emphasis to demand for labor. Economic rent क्या है? A surplus, not a cost. Factor of production can be most efficiently employed at outputs they are designed for and work less efficiently at a small output because they cannot be divided into smaller units. To which of the following economies of scale does this comment refer? External. A firm which operates in an imperfect product market has a negatively sloped resource demand curve because MPP increases and product price falls as output increases. In practice, the reward paid to a factor depends upon its productivity and the price of the product it makes. Quasi rent is price minus AFC. When one factor is fixed, the MRP of various factor will decline as output expand provided the price of product does not rise. तो देखिए ये MA/MFC A इज इक्वल टू MPB/MFC B ऐसे ही चलेगा एंड 1/MPC N इज इक्वल टू 1/MPC N. An imperfectly competitive seller's resource demand curve slope downwards because marginal product diminish and product price falls and output increases. Under perfect competition in factor market, AFC is equal to MFC. The demand for money for speculative motive depends on current level of interest. When BMP is greater than MRP is greater than price, we have both monopolistic and monosonistic exploitation. जब और चीज़ें इक्वल रहती हैं, more of a factor will be supplied to an industry at a higher reward than at a lower reward. MFC greater than P when the firm is a monopsonist and oligopoly a monopolistic competitor. सभी हैं. The marginal revenue product of any factor of production is the price per unit output X into the marginal physical product of the factor. When the wage rate of an individual increases from a very low level, his supply curve of labor is expected to be initially positively sloped and later negatively sloped and concave to y-axis. The demand for money for transaction motive depends chiefly on current level of income. When all firms using factor A are monopolists in their respective product market, D is obtained by a consideration of the firm. MRP curve is the initial effect only of a change in P. A negatively sloped supply curve of labor of an individual indicates that the substitution effect of an increase in the wage rate is weaker than income effect. One reason why people hold money is that it is only asset which is perfectly liquid. When the market supply curve of factor A is positively sloped, the intersection of D and S determines both equilibrium price and quantity. People will tend to demand money if they think the price of bond will fall. Under imperfect competition in factor market, MFC is greater than AFC. अब देखिए आगे 1233 से लेके 35 तक एक फिगर पर बेस है क्वेश्चन. देखिए नीचे श्रम के घंटे दिए हुए हैं और साथ वाई एक्स पर हमारा जो है मजदूरी की दर दी गई है. ये मजदूरों की देखिए डिमांड है और ये सप्लाई कर्व है. वाई डिमांड कर्व राइजेस फ्रॉम D1 to D2 द सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर. डिमांड कर्व D1 से D2 तक क्यों जा रहा है? क्योंकि सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर जो है वो बढ़ रही है. When demand curve rise from D3 to D4, the supply of labor contracts. जब डिमांड कर्व D2 से D3 की तरफ बढ़ता है तो सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर कैसी रहती है? रिमेन कांस्टेंट. अगर ए है, ये केवल वेरिएबल फैक्टर है एक कॉम्पिटिटिव फर्म के लिए प्रोडक्ट मार्केट में, तो फर्म का डिमांड कर्व जो है फैक्टर ए के लिए कैसा होगा? BMP कर्व. A firm demand curve for a factor production when only one factor can be varied is the MRP curve. Consideration of the external effect of a fall in the factor price will make the market demand curve of the factor less elastic than otherwise. The smaller the proportion of total cost accounted for by a given factor production, the more inelastic its demand. An individual supply curve of labor is positively sloped provided substitution effect of a wage increase is stronger than its income effect. Quasi rent is greater than the firm's total profit. Wage rate differ from industry to industry because of different marginal productivities of labor. The advocate of loanable fund theory of interest is Hansen. Indifference curve between income and leisure for an individual are generally convex to origin. Wage offer curve shows the relationship between money income of an individual and the work effort that is ready to put in. ये जो लिस्ट दी गई है इसमें से एक जो है वो कैपिटल नहीं है, तो वो क्या है? Goods lying with consumer. The aggregate supply of land is perfectly inelastic. The following are the items which firms may need to carry on their businesses. Stock of raw material, a fund from worker can be paid fund. So first and second. Quasi rent is earned by land even in the long run because land is a free gift of nature. Which of the following is correct? The more elastic is the demand for the industry's output, the larger the proportion of total cost accounted for by the payment to the factor, the easier it is to substitute other factor for one in question, यानी सभी. That the rent of land is a return for the use of original and indestructible power of the soil was the essence of the theory proposed by David Ricardo. Which is not the characteristic feature of capital as a means of production, fixed supply. Because labor is paid wage equal to its marginal product, which may be less than the average product, it is exploited. If, as a result of wage rate going up, an individual is ready to work than before then, substitution effect is stronger than income effect. ये लिस्ट दी में आइटम दिए हुए हैं, तो इनमें से कौन सा जो है वो कैपिटल नहीं है? A straw hat in your room. Because the aggregate supply of a factor is limited, can be made available for a use only when withdrawn from some other. In a long run, quasi rent disappears. Liquidity preference means showing a preference to hold money which is more liquid than to hold bond and security. The concept of quasi rent implies return to the fixed factor production in the short run. People will tend to move out of money and into bond if they think the rate of interest is going to fall. The theory of distribution only lays down the broad principle of distribution. Which of the following are relevant to defining the definition of capital as a factor of production? All existing goods which can be used in future production, the ability to contribute to the future satisfaction of one and 3. Short run return to fixed supply factor of production are known as no rent, pure rent. When there are different grades of land, the marginal land refers to the grade which earn no rent. ये देखिए फिगर दे रखी है, इनमें से पूछ रहे हैं कि इन कौन से रेशो हैं जो मार्जिनल प्रोडक्टिविटी बताते हैं। ये देखिए एक्स अक्ष पर हमारी यूनिट ऑफ लेबर है और वाई अक्ष पर टोटल आउटपुट है। तो देखिए BC जो है BC अपॉन AC ये दिखाती है मार्जिनल प्रोडक्टिविटी। A firm operating in perfectly competitive product and factor market maximizes its total profit when MP is equal to MPP upon MPB is equal to 1 upon MCX is equal to 1 upon MP 1 upon P. When there are different grade of land, the intra-marginal land refer to the grade which earns some rent. Frank Knight regard profit as the payment received by an entrepreneur for his risk-taking and activities in which some element of uncertainty are involved. The demand curve for labor is also its marginal revenue productivity curve. If an economy is a purely competitive static economy, then economic profit will be zero. Wages are the remuneration paid for the use of labor. In Schumpeter's view, an entrepreneur is Schumpeter जो है वो साहसी को क्या मानते हैं? An innovator of new product and process. A decision to increase the amount of capital available usually entails present sacrifice and future gain. क्वासी रेंट किसने दिया था? अल्फ्रेड मार्शल ने. When a factor A is only variable factor for an imperfect competitor in the product market, the firm's demand for a factor A is given by its MRPA curve. A firm's demand curve for a factor production is equivalent to the total revenue product curve of the labor. If the appropriate cost for purchased goods and materials, labor, land, entrepreneurs, talent, and taxes which the firm pay are subtracted from its total revenue, the remaining portion is known as MPP1 plus MPP2 plus MPP3, so on. The supply curve indicates that a rise in wages reduces the size of working population. The classical theory of the interest equates investment with the existence of consumption. एक मोनोपोलिस्ट जो है वो लेबर को एम्प्लॉय देना कम कर सकता है एट ए पॉइंट अर्लियर देन द प्रोड्यूसर इन ए परफेक्ट मार्केट. द मार्जिनल प्रोडक्टिविटी थ्योरी ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन एक बुक में दी गई थी जिसका नाम था डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ वेल्थ, जो किसके द्वारा लिखी गई थी? लियोन बालरस. The difference between short-run earning of machine and short-run cost of keeping it in running order is known as quasi-rent. When the amount of land is fixed, the supply curve for land is perfectly inelastic. The rate is determined by the demand for land. The higher the demand for land, the greater the rent. In classical economics, primary factor of production refers to labor and land. Which of the following statement is not true? A trade union is likely to be successful in obtaining a wage increase when The supply of labor saving equipment is elastic. Which of the following is most sensitive to the changes in the interest rate? Speculative demand for money. With monopoly in the labor market and perfect competition in the product market, the monopoly exploitation will be equal to the difference between MRP and AW. In order in order to get the demand curve of a firm for one of the several variable factor production, we must consider monopolistic exploitation. The primary factor of production, land and labor, are so called because their supply are determined largely outside the economic system. Under condition of monopoly in the labor market, the trade union can succeed in achieving higher wages rate without decreasing employment, with increasing employment, with unemployment, all of the above. Under the long run factor market equilibrium of a firm which employs one variable factor and operate under perfect competition in both factor and product market. MFC is equal to AFC, MRP is equal to VMP, maximum ARP is equal to MFC, MRP is equal to MFC, यानी all the four. Under normal market condition, which one of the following will not happen if trade union force higher wages on the management? More workers would be employed because they find higher wages more attractive. Knight के अकॉर्डिंग प्रॉफिट इज द रिवार्ड ऑफ अनसर्टेनिटीज. सबसे पहले वेज फंड थ्योरी किसने दी थी? JS मिल ने. जब लेबर मार्केट में मोनोपोली है और परफेक्ट कंपटीशन है प्रोडक्ट मार्केट में, द मोनोपोलिस्टिक एक्सप्लॉयटेशन इन द इक्विलिब्रियम सिचुएशन डिफरेंस बिटवीन MW and AW. The price at which the ownership of capital good may be purchased is called its purchase price. The price at which service of capital may be hired temporarily is known as rental. Which theory is called as the new classical theory of rent of interest? Loanable fund theory. When there is monopoly in labor market and monopoly in product market, the monopolistic exploitation in the equilibrium situation is the difference between VMP and MRP. A firm attempting to find the least cost combination to produce a given output will hire up to the point where the ratio of marginal product equal the ratio of factor price. In a sense, all rent are scarcity rent and all rent are differential rent. ये किसके वर्ड हैं? ये हैं मार्शल के. When there is perfect competition in labor market and monopoly in product market, the monopolistic exploitation in the equilibrium situation is the difference between VMP and MRP. Which one of the following point is not one of the criticism of Ricardian theory of rent? The theory does not apply to the condition of perfect market. From the list of items given below, tick off all those you would classify under labor. A laborer cutting stone in a quarry. Interest is price paid for the use of capital in any market. The view of interest has been expressed by Marshall. Net profit stand for gross profit minus implicit cost. Which of the following equation stand for gross interest? Net interest plus insurance against personal risk plus insurance against trade risk plus wage of management. When there is monopoly in labor market and monopoly in product market, The total exploitation in the equilibrium situation is the difference between VMP and AW. If a perfect competitor wishes to reach his maximum profit position, and if X is output and Y is the input used in production of X, the perfect competitor should equate the price of Y with marginal physical product of Y into price of X. In a bilateral monopoly, the difference between VMP and MRP at the point of firm's equilibrium shows monopolistic exploitation. The relationship between the input to the production process and resulting output is known as production function. The change in the total output due to the change in the amount of any input is called marginal product. Explain the relation between factor production of fixed and variable inputs and outputs. Law of variable proportion. Increase in output is greater proportion than increase in input. This is called increasing return to scale. The value of a resource in a foregone employment is known as alternative cost. The payment which are made to factors of production to compensate for the toil and effort in tendency. Their service is called real cost. The relationship between product and cost known as cost function. The money expenditure of a firm on wages, salary, machine, insurance, tax, material, transportation, and so on is known as money cost. The total expenditure by the firm for fixed input is known as total fixed cost. The firm's total expenditure on variable inputs is called total variable cost. The sum of total fixed cost and total variable cost is known as total cost. Marginal cost is the change in total cost that results from 1 unit change in output. The total amount of money that a firm receives from the sale of product is called total revenue. The revenue per unit of one commodity sold is known as average revenue. The change in total revenue resulting from a unit change in the output sold is marginal revenue. ISOCONT shows all possible combination of the two input physically capable of producing a given level of output. Marginal rate of technical substitution defined as the rate which one input substitute for another input. The want satisfying power of a commodity is known as utility. Utility measured in terms of utils. Increase in total utility as a result of consumption of an additional unit is known as marginal utility. The sum of utility derived from the consumption of each unit of commodity consumed is known as total utility. The total utility divided by the number of unit is called average. What is the called point of satiety? यानी पूर्ण तृप्ति का पूर्ण संतुष्टि का बिंदु कहाँ होता है? The point where marginal utility becomes zero. Law of diminishing marginal utility states that marginal utility of a good diminishes as an individual consumes more unit of a good. The additional benefit which a person derives from a given increase of his stock of a thing diminish with every increase in the stock that he already has. ये किसने दिया है? मार्शल ने. The law of equally marginal utility states that for obtaining the maximum total satisfaction, the consumer will spend his income on various goods and services in such a way that the marginal rupee spent on each good or service gives him the same amount of satisfaction. That is, the marginal utility of a unit of money worth of all commodities are equal. The book वैल्यू एंड कैपिटल किसकी है ये हिक्स की है. Indifference curve represent the combination of goods which give same satisfaction to the consumer. A curve which first move upward then downward is naturally total utility curve. Marginal utility curve of a given consumer is also his demand curve. In case of normal good, the income effect is negative. The good that can be substituted for each other is called substitute good. Law of demand expresses the functional relationship between price and quantity. Elasticity of demand is defined as the measure of degree of responsiveness in quantity demanded to a change in price. The proportional change of amount purchased divided by the proportional change of price. The quotation is given by John Robinson. The responsiveness of change in quantity demand to a change in price known as price elasticity of demand. The responsiveness of demand to a change in income is known as income elasticity of demand. The responsiveness of the change in quantity demanded for one quantity due to change in the price of another commodity is known as cross elasticity of demand. A market structure which has large number of firms producing and selling homogeneous product and the customer have full knowledge about the equilibrium prices. Perfect competition. The market which has single seller, no substitute for the product, and entry of new firm is completely blocked is monopoly. The market which have large number of seller selling differentiated product and freedom to entry and exit is monopolistic competition. The market structure in which the number of sellers is small and there is interdependence in decision making by the firm is oligopoly. The monopolistic charge different prices from different buyers is called personal discrimination. Charging different price from different use of occupation is called trade discrimination. Charging of different price from different buyers for the same product is known as price discrimination. Selling costs are those costs which are to be incurred in order to alter the position or slope of the demand curve. The price rigidity constructed by PG. प्राइस रिजिडिटी किसका फीचर है? ये है ओलिगोपोली का. Marginal theory of productivity state that under the condition of pure competition factor are paid according to their marginal product. The price of a factor determined by both demand and supply of the factor. This theory is known as demand and supply theory. The portion of the produce of earth which is paid to the landlord for the original and indestructible power of the soil is called रेंट। ये डेफिनेशन किसने दी है? तो ये डेफिनेशन दी है रिकार्डो ने। Rent as a surplus earned by a factor unit cover and above the minimum earning necessary to include it to remain it in present use. This is known as modern theory of rent. Welfare economics as defined as the part of the general body of economic theory which is concerned primarily with policy. This statement is given by Skitovsky. Pareto criterion of welfare economics, he accepted the notion of interpersonal comparison of utility. Social function as a function either of the welfare of each member of the community or the quantities of product consumed and services rendered by each member of the community. The excess of price which a man would be willing to pay rather than go without the thing over that which he actually does pay, if the economic measure of surplus satisfaction. This is called consumer surplus. Which one of the following is the correct formula for locating arc elasticity of demand? The ultimate aim of the study of consumer behavior is to obtain a demand curve. Which of the following is a sunk capital? Sunk capital, a railway bridge. In case of price output equilibrium under monopoly, MR is equal to MC. The liquidity trap shows that interest rate must rise and bond price fall. If the production isocont is L-shaped, the two factors are perfect complement. If the production function is homogeneous, the functional coefficient is constant. Which of the following is the odd one out among the method of measuring elasticity of demand? ना तो पॉइंट है, ना परसेंटेज है, ना आर्क है. ये तीनों ही मेथड हैं, तो कोई भी ऑड नहीं है, तो नन ऑफ द अबव. Two good x and y, the cross elasticity of demand for x with respect to price of y is greater than 0. They are close substitute. On the basis of above diagram, D represents the point where the consumer got maximum satisfaction. This is the tangency point of LM and LC. They are प्राइस लाइन एंड इंडिफरेंस कर्व. देखिए ये तो प्राइस लाइन है, ये इंडिफरेंस कर्व है. Technological efficiency is achieved when the output produced is maximum for the given level of input. The theory of production explains which combination of input a firm will choose so as to minimize its cost of production. A producer attains least cost combination where MRTS XY is equal to price of X and Y. Symbolically, producer equilibrium is producer का इक्विलिब्रियम कहाँ होता है? MPL अपॉन PL इज इक्वल टू MPLK अपॉन PK. इसमें से हमें ऑड चुनना है, तो डेल्टा TFC अपॉन डेल्टा Q. Elasticity of supply is more elastic in long period. Adding up the quantity of each firm wood supply at each possible price can be industry supply function. TR curve and TC curve are parallel. TR exceed TC. इसका मतलब क्या है? Total profit is maximized when there is monopsony in labor market and monopoly in product market. The monopolistic exploitation in the equilibrium situation is the difference between VMP and AW. Who coined the term microeconomic and macroeconomic? Ragnar Frisch. An industry in economic mean a group of firms producing close substitute and having similar process of production. Economic static mean. Economic static mean functional relationship between any two variable over a period of time. Utility is a subjective concept. Which of the following formula used to find out MV of n unit? TU minus n minus TU n minus n. ये MV नहीं होगा, MU होगा, मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी. एवरेज यूटिलिटी स्टैंड फॉर total utility, number of units consumed. Consumer equilibrium means the position of rent or rest or maximization satisfaction with given income and prices. Which of the following is called Gauss's first law? गॉसन का फर्स्ट लॉ कहलाता है लॉ ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी. Like other economic laws, the law of diminishing marginal utility is only an explanation of consumers' tendency. If the MU is divided by the price of the commodity, the resultant figure will be called weighted MU. At the saturation point of commodity Y, the MUY is 0. The economically relevant portion of the total utility curve is that portion in which total utility is rising at a decline rate. Law of equimarginal utility states that MUX upon PX is equal to MUY upon PY, MUN upon PN. If the marginal utility of the last unit of commodity Q1 consumed is twice the MU of last unit Q2 consumed, the consumer is in equilibrium if the price of Q1 is twice the price of Q. Law of diminishing marginal utility is practically untrue explanation of consumer behavior because it is based on certain assumptions without which it cannot work. According to Marshall, the law of diminishing marginal utility applies on all commodities except money. Indifference curve represent only two commodities. Indifference curves may be parallel or may not be parallel. The general equation on the budget constraint is PXQX is equal to plus PYQY is equal to M. Which statement according to your understanding is correct? A horizontal indifference curve is in abnormal case. When two goods are perfect substitutes, MRS XY will be constant. An inferior commodity is one which is consumed in a smaller quantities when the income of the consumer rises. In case of inferior good, as a result of fall in price, the substitution effect increase quantity demanded. The demand curve for inferior good will be negatively sloped if the substitution effect is stronger than income effect. Consumer demand curve can be derived from PCC. When the slope of PCC is 0, तो इलास्टिसिटी कैसी होगी? तो ये होगी यूनिट इलास्टिक. If PCC for a commodity is horizontal at or relevant price for it, the demand curve for that commodity is a rectangular hyperbola. Which of the following is correct? कौन सा इसमें से सही है? An increase in demand is not the same thing as an extension of demand. Normal demand curve of a commodity has a negative slope. When the price of good A increase and the demand for good B increase, then A and B are substitute. When decrease in the price of A leads to increase in the quantity demanded of B, it can be concluded that A and B are complementary. इनमें से कौन सा स्टेटमेंट सही है? इनकम डिमांड कर्व स्लोप डाउनवर्ड टू द राइट. इनकम डिमांड कर्व स्लोप अपवर्ड टू द राइट. Income demand curve shows income quantity relationship. Production function is purely a technical relationship between input and output. When AP of labor is positive but declining, the marginal product of labor could be none of the above. What is the difference between return to a factor and return to scale? Variability of input in the production function. A producer attains the least cost combination when the relation between MRTS and price of factor X and Y is MRTS XY is equal to PX upon PY. According to Marshall, law of diminishing return is applicable to agriculture. Increasing return to scale can be explained in terms of internal economics. Diseconomies of management result in decreasing return to scale. If by increasing the quantity of capital by 1 unit, the firm can give up 2 units of labor to produce the same level of output, the MRTS scale is true. Correct statement देखना है. The optimum combination of two factors is yielded by the point at which the equal product curve is stagnant to isochrot line. The cost that any firm incurs in purchasing or hiring any factor production is referred explicit cost. The difference between ATC and AFC shows variable cost. Which of the following statement is correct? Price elasticity of demand at any point of the demand curve of a monopolist change from the other. Which of the following is closely approximate the definition of oligopoly? The cigarette industry. An industry can be properly described as an oligopoly if the number of firms in the industry few, each with a significant function of market. Does the king demand theory apply to an oligopoly with product differentiation? No. The economist who first evolved and used the king demand curve is price theory is Edward Chamberlain. Centralized cartel lead to a monopoly solution behave as a multiple monopolist to minimize total cost is USA. All of that. Who is likely to be priced later under an oligopoly? Any unit with efficient production capabilities. According to king demand curve theory, the elasticity of demand is higher for a price decrease than a price increase. The break-even point of a firm refers to the level of output at which losses cease and profit begin, assuming that they are fixed price. When a firm reduces its price of product, then nothing certain can be said. The theory of distribution concerns itself with functional distribution. The market demand for factor is primary demand. Value of marginal product is defined as MPP into P. The change in marginal physical product and marginal revenue product are exactly similar when the price of the product remains constant. Under pure competition in the long run, the firm equilibrium at a point where MC is equal to ARP is equal to MRP. The difference in the wage of men and women are due to sometime due to difference in efficiency and sometime not. In general, the level of wage is equal to the point where the demand and supply curve of labor cut each other. Who propounded the wage theory profit tossing? According to modern theory of rent arises on all the above factor यानी labor, land, capital. In a sense, all rent are scarcity rent and all rent are differential rent. This remark was made by Marshall. Short period return to a fixed supply of factor of production are known as quasi rent. Quasi rent is P minus ABC. Quasi rent is the rent earned by the instrument of production beside land. Which of the following equation stand for gross interest? Net interest plus depreciation. Pure interest will be smaller than gross interest. One reason why people hold money is that it is only asset which is perfectly liquid. People will tend to demand money if they expect that price of bond will fall. Change in the rate of interest do not particularly affect the amount money held for transaction and precautionary both. मैचिंग करनी है देखिए इसमें तो देखिए जो हमारी रेंट थ्योरी ऑफ प्रॉफिट है ये किसने दी है देखिए रेंट थ्योरी ऑफ प्रॉफिट दी है हमारी वॉकर ने बेस थ्योरी ऑफ प्रॉफिट दी है टॉजिंग एंड डेवनपोर्ट ने रिस्क थ्योरी ऑफ प्रॉफिट दी है हमें हॉलवे अनसर्टेनिटी की हमने नाइट ने दी है और डायनेमिक थ्योरी ऑफ प्रॉफिट दी है जेबी क्लार्क ने तो इसके अकॉर्डिंग हमारा देखिए डी ऑप्शन राइट है द स्लोप ऑफ आइसो प्रोडक्ट लाइन इंडिकेट marginal rate of technical substitution. The market price mean the long period price. The firm stop producing goods when the marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal. A firm said to be equilibrium when it has no incentive either to contract or expand its output. Demand schedule is shown as demand schedule कैसे शो किया जाता है a function of price alone. When the demand curve is a rectangular hyperbola, it represents utility elastic demand. Elasticity of demand in the following figure at Q1 is देखिए ये Q1 है इस पर पूछ रहे हैं R Q1 अपॉन S Q1 ये अपॉन ये और देखिए इससे पहले वाले Q पे हमारा क्या रहेगा इससे पहले पे रहेगा R Q अपॉन S Q. Elasticity of supply for a positively sloped straight line supply curve that intersected the price axis is 0. Demand for electricity is elastic, inelastic. The formula E is equal to E Px upon Qy is equal to Px into delta Qy upon Qy into delta Px. Cross elasticity of demand for Y. A consumer teaches equilibrium at a point where mu is greater than mu is equal to p. The general equation of budget constraint line. देखिए डायग्राम में इस पे पूछा जा रहा है इफ़ एक्स ओनली एन इन्फीरियर गुड, तो IC1 रिप्रेजेंट, अगर ये इन्फीरियर गुड है तो ये हमारा जो है ये क्या दिखा रहा है, इनकम कंजम्पशन कर्व। ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ अबव डायग्राम द कर्व IC देयर इज नेगेटिव इनकम इफेक्ट बियॉन्ड पॉइंट ए। सप्लाई ऑफ ए कमोडिटी मीन्स stock available for consumption. Economy of scale means addition to the unit cost of production. Average fixed cost can be obtained through TFC upon TQ, which is the best definition of marginal firm. The firm which makes only normal profit. Price taker firm do not advertise because they can sell as much they want at the current price. MC is equal to MR is equal to AC is equal to AR. Long run equilibrium competitive firm. Under perfect competition, a firm can produce with optimum plant. The equilibrium level of output for the pure monopolist is where MR is equal to MC. A king is most consistent with which one of the following market situation? Oligopoly. Symbol है कि MRP is equal to delta TR upon delta Q. Substitution effect occurs when a factor gives up leisure and is induced offer himself for more work. Quasi rent is price minus AVC. Net profit stand for gross profit minus implicit cost. That's all for today. ये माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स के क्वेश्चन हमारे ख़त्म हो गए हैं। ये इतने क्वेश्चन हैं कि अगर केवल आप इनको ही कर लेते हैं तो आपको कहीं और से भी माइक्रो पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं है। अगर आपको ये वीडियो अच्छा लगा हो तो इसके और भी पार्ट हमने बनाए हैं, तो उन सबको आप देखिए, आपकी पूरी माइक्रो कवर हो जाएगी सभी लेवल के कंपटीशन के लिए। अगर आपको ये वीडियो अच्छा लगा हो तो लाइक कीजिए, शेयर कीजिए, प्लीज़ हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए। थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग।